Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Adventures in Crowdsourcing, Emergency Management. My name is Kevin Vita, and I'll be helping facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, also known as NOCO. As a quick reminder, if you don't know already, at NOCO, we offer a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. On the lower right side of your screen, you can see a box called Useful Links. You can browse through those links for TSM&O resources and news. Previous webinar recordings related to this topic can also be accessed from there. Now I'll cover a few logistics for today's webinar. We are recording this webinar, and the recording, along with the presentation slides, will be available through the on-demand learning section of our website. All of the attendees are in listen-only mode by default, but we'd like you to stay engaged by using the question and discussion pod for comments and questions. We have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions, we encourage you to enter them in the questions pod as they come to your mind at any time. The questions will be read aloud one at a time by the moderator, and our presenters will answer each question. So that's all I have, and with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, James Colyar, to start us off.
Great, thank you, Kevin, and thanks to all of NOCO staff for helping and assisting with this webinar and supporting our webinar series on adventures in crowdsourcing. This is, I think, our 14th webinar we've done in the series. All of our previous ones are recorded and available on the NOCO website. So it's just been great to have NOCO to host these webinars. So my name is James Colyar. I'm with Federal Highway Administration Office of Operations, and I'm one of the co-leads of the Crowdsourcing for Advancing Operations initiative. And I'm happy to be here giving the intro today and hosting the Q&A later. So quick disclaimer, words from our lawyers, but basically today in this webinar we may talk about some vendors, products, or manufacturers specifically, and those are really only intended for informational purposes, considered essential to the presentations today, and no means does it mean that there's an endorsement from Federal Highway or any of our speakers today. So you see the agenda here on this slide. So these times are obviously in Eastern time zone, but basically I'll give a quick overview and some updates, and hopefully less than 10 minutes here so we can get to the presenters. We'll have our first presenter from Florida DOT talk about crowdsourced data for hurricane response. Our next presenter from Alabama DOT talk about crowdsourced data for evacuations. Our third presenters from Kentucky Transportation Cabinet talk about crowdsourced data for winter weather, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So if you think of any questions as we're going through, just feel free to type them in the question discussion pod, and we'll definitely make time to get to those at the end of our presentations. So as you see from the agenda, all of our topics today are around the topic, all of our presentations are around the topic of emergency management and how crowdsourced data can be helpful for improving an agency's ability to respond to emergencies. Okay, so here's some pictures. So our first presenter will be Amy Dirusso from Florida DOT. Brett Sellers will come next from Alabama DOT. And then batting cleanup will be the dynamic duo of Randi, Feltner, and Chris Lambert from Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Just want to thank our speakers today for taking the time to prepare these presentations and for presenting here today about their great lessons learned and applications they'll be sharing. Their full bios are on the webinar registration page, and I'll also introduce them as we go through today's agenda. So a quick overview, what is Everyday Counts? If you've been on our webinars before, you know it stands for EDC. And it's basically a program administered by Federal Highway Administration, but it's really based on state and local agencies' needs and what they identify as upcoming innovations that are deployed but not rapidly deployed, or proven, I guess, but in a few locations but not rapidly deployed across the country. And the EDC program really helps to foster these innovations. And as you see there, the purposes really of these innovations are to shorten project delivery, enhance roadway safety, reduce traffic congestion, and integrate automation. And the crowdsourcing for operations innovation that we're talking about today is really focused on those middle two, roadway safety and reduced traffic congestion. So why crowdsourcing for operations? Maybe you're an agency manager or technical staff member wondering why this would be helpful for you. Just a quick refresher. There's many types of crowdsourced data, from vehicle probe data, data that you can procure or get from navigation apps such as Waze. States and local agencies have their own 511 or 311 apps where the citizens and travelers can report information directly. Connected vehicle data. So there's really a whole host of crowdsourced data. There's even emerging data like video analytics from fleet and public vehicles and shared mobility that we highlighted on our last webinar in July. But all of these data can really help transportation agencies to improve their operational capabilities with greater and more timely geographic roadway monitoring and real-time situational awareness. It can help agencies increase their safety and reliability of operations, as well as informing infrastructure enhancements for safety. And then it can also improve and save costs for operations and asset management by potentially reducing operator workload, retiring ITS assets that are costly to maintain, and then balancing infrastructure investment with crowdsourced data for enhanced system monitoring. Hopefully you'll see some of these benefits ring true today in our presentations on emergency management. When we talk about crowdsourced data, it can really be applied to many different application areas, as we call them. As you see here, there's a wide range of things. These are kind of within the realm of transportation operations, or TSM&O. Some of the low-hanging fruit we saw with EDC Round 5 were that agencies were using crowdsourced data for traffic incident management and better traveler information. But then beyond that, we saw agencies expanding to traffic studies, before and after studies, better roadway weather management, performance management, performance analytics and monitoring, and arterial management through better traffic signal timing. And even beyond that, we're seeing agencies use crowdsourced data for better freeway management, even using it for improved ramp metering and variable speed limit applications. As an example, better work zone management, detecting where the back of queue is in real time, very important for work zones. Roadway and ITS maintenance, identifying where potholes are or traffic signals are down. Project prioritization, all that data can be archived and used in a whole host of ways in planning for our operations applications. And then emergency management, which is the focus of what we're going to be talking about today. So just to kind of highlight the point that crowdsourced data can really be used for everything within the umbrella of TSM&O. Just a couple quick updates on where we're at with EDC 6, or Round 6, which started in January this year, and it's a 2-year period. We'll go through the end of 2022. We have just recently published 5 case studies, which are now available on our FHWA EDC 6 crowdsourcing site. And we'll post that in the question pod. I see Grady did that. Thanks, Grady. You can click that link to see our 5 case studies. We're featuring Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, Utah DOT Citizen Reporter Program, Indiana DOT's use of probe data, Lake County DOT's, and City of Louisville DOT's and their use of Waze data. We just started crowdsourcing cohorts. We had our first round of meetings in July and August. have another round of meetings in October. If you're interested in participating, feel free to email me about that. We have 3 cohorts set up right now on the topics of navigation app uses, data analytics, and vehicle probe data. And then our next webinar will be announced or advertised soon, sometime in September, and it will focus on how local agencies are sharing and using free source code to process navigation app data. So be on the lookout for that. There's a couple of updates on what's going on with EDC6 Crowdsourcing for Operations. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Amy Dirusso. Amy graduated from the University of South Alabama with a degree in civil engineering, and she began her career with a consulting firm specializing in geotech engineering, and then she started her career with Florida DOT about 6 years ago, and as a professional engineer in the traffic operations department. So we're really happy to have Amy present today. And Amy, if you're ready, it's all yours.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon. Like the presenter said, my name is Amy Dirusso. I am the TSM&O program engineer for the Florida Department of Transportation, which I'm in District 3. I'll be showing you about our, what we call it, a situational awareness dashboard that we developed to allow users that were approved to see real live status of the traffic signals after an emergency. And this was actually created from lessons learned after one of our worst hurricanes that we had in our area here recently, back in 2018. Next slide. Just want to present in general, we're in line with our FDOT mission and vision for this effort, our situational awareness dashboard, which provided an opportunity to innovate an application to support the vital few goals, which is to improve safety, enhance mobility, and inspire innovation. Next slide. So first, I just want to tell you where District 3 is within Florida. You can see that we're at the top northwest corner, which we consider is the Panhandle. Each year, each department prepares for hurricane season, which is between June 1st and November 30th. Our traffic engineering department executes emergency contracts such as temporary traffic signal repairs, permanent traffic signal repairs, generator deployment, and the associated CEI for these services, just for them in my department. So back in 2018, our district was hit with one of the worst hurricanes, which is a Cat 5, which is Hurricane Michael. And if you look to the left, you'll see the Michael track, and that actually comes right through the middle of our district. You'll see the Michael symbol, the red that comes through there. So Hurricane Michael was a Category 5, which is the highest category, and our district experienced wind speeds over 157 miles all the way through the panel, and actually going up through still a Category 5 up through the Panhandle to the next state, the northern state. The recovery of this transportation system was challenging, but the Florida DOT met that challenge, and we pursued opportunities to improve for the next time we ever, hopefully never, come into an effort like that. As you said, we made landfall about the center of our district, and if you look to the right, 2 years later, we were able to present lessons learned through Hurricane Sally, which is at your far left. She came through as a Category 2, and she came through basically the Florida-Alabama state line right there. Even though Sally was a 2, she still left major damages within our transportation system. And there again, noting from the damages during 2018, we were able to implement lessons learned. So we were able to establish this dashboard to assist us during the recovery of Sally. So our technology was used to the full extent for situational awareness for the recording purposes of the damage assessments, which is required by FEMA. Now you kind of wonder why we went to this extent. Hurricane Michael basically left us high and dry for quite a while. Our main communication support was down in Bay County where the actual landfall hit. And the day before the hurricane hit, a dump truck, which was just down the street from our headquarters, it hit our power lines, which and also was part of the communications of our phones. So we were without phone, landline within the building itself, and then we had zero internet, and there was no communication in and out. I lived an hour west of the headquarters, and I had service, but once I drove into the area, there was zero cell service. There was no communications within our DOT, so we couldn't even communicate to our partners anywhere. And until people learned that when the internet or even the cell phones were down within the area, that we had to get another provider to establish communication. So there was a lot of lessons learned just from that one event. Next slide. So during the recovery of Hurricane Michael, which was 2018, we realized there was a need to develop a better way to communicate the repairs and statuses of our traffic signals after a major event. I'm not quite sure how every other state has presents themselves after an emergency, but there's quite a few. The governor or upper management are wanting to know how bad the damage was, how many lights are out. We deploy our generators to get the lights that are without power working again, because as you all know, if you've ever went through an event, people don't necessarily want to stay home after. They want to kind of look around, and that's the worst thing that they could do is drive around and look at all the devastation. And so what is the first focus is the safety to the people that are out there as they try to commute. They're driving around. We got emergency vehicles. We got, all these consultant contractors coming to help us, restore power and whatnot. We've got to deal with the traffic. And so, yes, there's a bridge down or a road washed away, and that takes time to repair. So the first focus is we got to get our traffic signals, up and running, and then we got to have communication. So we discussed lessons learned from Hurricane Michael and brainstorm what can we do better next time. We began looking at our planning and our preparation activities and reach out to our consultants and our in-house GIS department, and you'll see why we reach out to them specifically. So we discussed what our end goal was, and it was a real-time status of the traffic signals as it relates to the damage, and then the status of the repairs and when they were coming back online. Additional resources were needed to put this plan in action, so we had to discuss this with other teams and collect data and provide real-time status using the GIS, and you'll see how the actual live tool was used and developed here shortly. Next slide. So our approach began working with our GIS department, and we created, we tagged along, they've already developed an application which they call the Collector app, where they dispatch teams to go do damage assessments. So you've got teams that are allocated to certain corridors, and they go ahead and, and address, all right, there's guardrails out from this mile marker or some designation, and, the road's washed out. Well, we were able to tag along and actually kind of do a whole nother collector application, which was only steered towards signals. because a lot of our in-house people that would go out and do the data collection doesn't really know the tech savvy of a signal, if it had 4 heads, if it had 2 heads, or even know if it had heads to begin with, because when they show up, there's nothing there. So we created a system that had, if you show up at this location, this, lat long, you're supposed to have 2 heads facing each direction, and just the whole gamut of mast arm, strain pole, whatever it is, there was a back system that shows you what's supposed to be there, and then a whole plethora of other information that you can store in there, like the strain pole was damaged, that mast arm or is twisted, or whatever damage was there, and we used consultants that knew exactly what a signal is supposed to look like, and it can actually open up a cabinet door and look at it. So we were able to do this by giving our teams, our technical teams, with the application that was installed on either their iPhones or iPads or whatever device that they had. And these people would train beforehand. Before every season, we designate people, and they get trained, and they're ready to go. We say, hey, we already have a system out there right now in Florida. We put everybody in alert, the whole state of Florida, or on alert for the next week, and to try to figure out where these teams will go, depending on where the landfall is. So we have our damage assessment teams, and then we have also another team called our situational awareness team. And this team, they don't have to be very tech savvy. They are my group of people that will go by in the morning and then at night to their designated areas, and then either click on that location and say it's in flash, so it's got a yellow indicator. If it's in green, it's functioning, it's green, and then if it's still out, it'll be red. And you'll see this tool here in a minute. But this mobile data collection application was built on the Esri ArcGIS Cloud platform and ArcGIS Online, and was connected to the live dashboard. Next slide. As mentioned before, the tool was created after we went through the Category 5 in 2018. So 2 years later, we were able, not thankfully, but we were successfully able to test, and we were able to actually modify easily this dashboard that was developed on the fly. When we saw Hurricane Sally, and we knew that it was definitely on the west end of the Florida Panhandle, and we just assumed the first 4 counties were going to be hit. So we geared our dashboard to focus in on those 4 counties, and then we used teams to go to those areas all within 1 to 2 days, and well, the first day right after, but within 1 to 2 days, everybody had at least been to the locations of all those signals within those areas, and and determine what status of that signal was. So even though Hurricane Sally was a 2, the rainfall lasted, it was up to 24 inches and sometimes 30 inches, and it was slow moving. And if you've ever been in a hurricane, no one hurricane is the same. You got to be prepared for what you didn't get prepared for last time. So this time, we weren't prepared, or we were prepared, but we didn't have this in Hurricane Michael. We had flooding rivers. We had actually a couple of interstates and state highways shut down because of the high flooding rivers. So we had a lot of detours that we had to implement. And then one of our main bridges over in the Pensacola area, that was being constructed. It was an old bridge that was, we had one bridge actually open as they were dismantling the old bridge and then getting ready to do the second bridge. So we had 2 parallel bridges. And during that one bridge, that was opened, it got damaged in the storm. It not only got damaged just from the construction, some of the damages were, even affected the foundation. So we had to put an emergency detour, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that detour later in the presentation. But just knowing that each hurricane is going to present something new that you didn't think of before. Maybe you did, you just weren't prepared to provide information to the public or even your management or even your governor. Next slide. So as I previously mentioned, we establish DAT teams, damage assessment teams, and SAT teams, situational awareness teams. And that teams were, like I said before, were staffed with true traffic signal specialists or technicians that knows the in and outs of a signal, open up a cabinet, can do quick retiming and queue or get it out of flash or put it in flash, and they're able to do some quick fine-tuning efforts if it was just a simple fix to get it back working, if that was possible. Like I said, our SAT teams were, some consultants and a mixture of in-house staff, and they would just go around with their device and update any changes in the status of that signal. And with that was recorded into the real-time dashboard, was that not only they were recording and documented, it pushed itself out to whoever had access to this tool. They would have real live data, they knowing exactly what was changed, what was the day before, what it looks like graphically, and you'll see a dashboard here shortly. But it was a great tool because during Michael, when we had no communication, I was stuck in our TMC that had AC. We were using a hot phone, a hotspot, and using, one computer, no printer, and trying to push out, hey, we had 96 signals out, 3 got fixed today, we have 2 generators, and it was just such a stressful time already dealing with a hurricane, but having to send out data morning and night to upper management, and therefore the governor, because they want to know what's being done, how slow we're going, how fast we're going, and it was such a stressful time anyway. That's why this was created, to put the pressure off of us, and together having the teams in place, and together with this dashboard and the tools, this was very efficient to get the communication out that was needed. Next slide. So here's an example of what this actually looks like. So like I told you before, we narrowed it down to the 2 western counties, Escambia and Santa Rosa, and this was actually taken, this snapshot was probably taken about maybe 1 week after, or by 3 days after the storm hit. And you'll see by the green that those signals were back up and running. The yellows were the ones that were in flash, and the reds were damaged, or the heads were twisted to where even if it could work, it was facing the wrong direction, which would be misleading to the public. So it was a true app, and so you see off to the right in the table where it shows you total signals, the ones that are working, the ones in flash when are out, and then a percentage of them running or them functioning. And so it was a true, really cool dashboard that they gave anybody that had access to this information live. Because also during Hurricane Michael, we had no communication. So if we had used this, we were able to understand what it could happen, was that we send out the teams, and they were able to insert all the information they have. And even though if they didn't have communication, they were required to drive out to an area by 6 or 7 p.m. And once they got to a tower site that had communication, all of it would populate at that time. So even though they couldn't get maybe live data, like if we did this during a Hurricane Michael, they would at least get it in the afternoon and the morning where there was work done. But during Sally, we didn't have any communication issues. So this, like I said, this picture presents a snapshot less than 1 week after the storm made landfall. Only 2 counties, which included around 300 traffic signals. And we basically had the signal damage about 95% back in operation less than 1 week. We found limited damage, but there was some damage, within the ones that actually got hit. And then the other 2 counties to the right, which we had included originally, they didn't have any damage, so we were able to narrow it down from 4 just to drill into the 2 counties. So this application was developed to be compatible with smartphones and smart devices to collect information from the crowd of people, which we called the crowdsourcing, supporting the situational awareness data collection process. The application was easy to use and provided a capability of capturing the crowdsourced data offline, which could then be synced once the crews traveled into an area that had cell phone or Wi-Fi service. The crowdsourced data was captured and displayed in real time, which allowed everyone to be aware of the situation on the ground, and the damage was assessed efficiently with no confusion to duplicity. And you'll see, we had the color scheme, but if you had a question like, well, do you assume all green to begin with? No, we darkened everything and we put it all in gray, and then once people went to the site, that it was either green, yellow, or red. Next slide. And this is another snapshot. If you're a user of this dashboard, you could drill in, zoom in to a specific location. Like they went to this one that was flashing, and within that, whoever wanted to look at it, they wanted to get drilled down. They could look at who was there, what time they were there, what damage did they observe. They can include pictures, just a whole wealth of knowledge in there, which also paralleled us to, with this data, was us able to also use this data to help us create what we call DDIRs, which is a report that's required by FEMA. So not only was it a useful tool to keep folks in the know, but it was another leg to help us in doing the damage assessments needed to get reimbursement. Next slide. Excuse me. So I'm going to show you a video, and I'm going to ask our folks to probably do it once or twice, and it's going to show you, well, if you looked at it, you started off in the gray. All gray is what you see to begin with. And then you'll see these are half-day increments as it goes to when the crews were there and they were able to populate what was going on, and then the actual situational awareness of it populate. I guess it's kind of going slow. Hopefully you guys can see it. It may not work too well, but if we get it working, we can definitely give you another screenshot. But it shows you basically 6-hour increments of how our teams went out there within 2 days and got the status of all the signals. There you go. There it goes now. Okay. So it was pretty cool. It captured this kind of data to actually go back in history and like, wow, it only took 2 days to get all the status of the signals, and then the yellows kept turning to green, because not only did these DAT teams, our technical crews, they are also able to assist with the team that was out there trying to fix the signals. So if there was if somebody had it in flash and there was a signal head that was just need to be adjusted and they have the equipment, they can go and move the signal head around. But this is just another application that could use to give you true data and some recording and measurements and show you how it was populated in real time. Next slide. So in addition to Google Maps, the app provided Esri crowdsourced real-time traffic conditions on freeways and arterials. This information was useful during situational awareness data collection process for the team routing and setting up strategies for the detour. So when that bridge was damaged, our folks were able to gather, information while they're out there, and started helping us try to do some TSM&O improvements on the new detour that was designated for that effort. So we were able to use our folks out there and able to show us some live data, and even using some applications to show us where there was heavy congestion, there was an incident, to where we could get responders out there. So it was very useful for the detour, not only for the traffic signals, but to get us ready for the detour. Next slide. So if you look at this map, you see where the triangle is, the red triangle. This is the bridge that was damaged, and that was a main commuter between Pensacola and Gulf Breeze. There's a lot of people that live in Gulf Breeze and go work in Pensacola and vice versa. So this is a main corridor that was 3 miles long, and ADT is around 57,000 a day. So the alternate detour is the yellow. And so when people are used to getting across that bridge in 6 minutes, they are now required to drive almost 45 miles to get where they would have otherwise. So, but because of what we're able to do, we're able to look at some of the data that we had out there, to put up, immediate traffic control devices, to restore travel lanes, to assist with whatever we can to improve the painful detour that the commuters would now have to face. So our TMC started recording travel times between Gulf Breeze and Pensacola, only during peak hours. As we monitor the travel times, we began implementing active arterial traffic control devices and measures of critical junctions, as highlighted by 1, 2, and 3 in that map. And then we disseminated real-time travel information to the travelers via the FL511 website, our dynamic message boards that are out there, and the ones that we did, the variable ones that we deployed as well. Next slide. So these are some things that we did. We worked with our consultants and contractors to immediately implemented signal timing adjustments and active arterial management. So when people were usually going west from Gulf Breeze and going north to Pensacola, all the signal timings, we had to be reversed to go the other way. And we had to listen to a lot of people that were, upset with not only the detour, but then they couldn't get out on the main line because we had too much green to the main line and little to the side roads. We had to add a new signal head at the interstate at that detour because we had to give more left-hand turn lane to the north-end users, because before it was never needed. So not even another signal head, we increased ramps for the turn lane, and even widening some ramps to alleviate the traffic that was backed on the interstate to get to the detour. Next slide. This is a busy screen, but if you download it and try to spend some time with it, you'll be able to see some of the things that we implemented, such as we even added the road rangers along the detour, not to drive it, but to be nearby to assist with an incident. You can only imagine the commuters were used to a 4-lane bridge, and now they were being forced to a 2-lane highway, and also a toll plaza where people had to slow down. We had to lift we're able to lift the tolls and then have people go straight on through. We continuously monitored the detour and measure the travel time. We sent out information to local media and, updates on FL 511. Next slide. This is another interesting slide. In the beginning, like I was saying before, the travel time, the peak period travel time between Pensacola, 2 points that we measured, if it was a point in time in Pensacola and Gulf Breeze, we measured that if the bridge was open, and then we measured the detour. And so, keeping apples to apples, you'll see that that was used to be 7 to 8 minutes long, and then after the detour began, it got to over an hour. But then we were able to improve enhancements, like we were saying before, and we were able to get it down to probably 49 minutes. But if we had normal situation where there wasn't a detour, there wasn't an issue, that detour should usually take 40 minutes. So with the congestion, with the improvements, 40 to 49 minutes, that's not too bad. But, still is definitely an increase from the typical time of, 5 to 6 minutes to now 40 to 45. Next slide. Well, this is the end of my presentation. I would usually take questions, but we're going to have questions and answers at the end of this meeting, and I will return this presentation back to James.
Great. Thanks, Amy, so much. You guys have definitely learned a lot and applied a lot of lessons learned from your multiple hurricane events you've had, and especially after Michael happened. So look forward to some questions. There's some questions already for you, Amy. We'll address at the end. Just a reminder, keep posting questions in the discussion pod as you think of them, and we'll get to those after the last presenter. So thanks again, Amy. I'd now like to introduce Brett Sellers from Alabama DOT. Brett's the Assistant State Transportation Systems Management and Operations Engineer, or TSM&O engineer, for the Alabama DOT. Brett helps facilitate advancement of the 9 TSM&O service layers across the Alabama DOT's 5 regions. Brett's a licensed engineer, 16 years of experience, and he's held positions with city, county, and state government, as well as the private sector. So, Brett, it's all yours, and take it away.
Thank you, James. I appreciate this opportunity to come on and speak to you guys. Thanks to FHWA for putting this together and for NOCO hosting it as well. So we'll talk a little bit about crowdsourcing and evacuations. Just a disclaimer, this presentation, the base for this presentation was given as an internal meeting that we had after Hurricane Michael as well. So it's kind of funny that Amy talked about that. It looks like we both learned a lot through that. So just know that some of these are kind of slanted towards internal training that we did. Because as you know, you can invest in these products, but if you don't teach your people to use them, let them know that it's available and spend time with them, you're just looking at wasted money. So let's talk a little bit about ALDOT and crowdsourced data. So we've been investing in probe data since 2012, maybe even a little bit before that. Kind of predates my time with the department, actually. But we have probe data that we purchase from here that is incorporated into our ATMS. We incorporate Waze data into our ATMS so we can identify possible crashes, things of that nature from an incident management standpoint. And then we also utilize some performance measure websites, both commercially available. Terrace Clear Guide is particularly ours, but we have some feature functionality built into our homegrown reporting side, which is Algo Reports. We've got a Delta speed map built in, which is a really nice feature that identifies not only where there is a slowdown, but you can identify just how much that slowdown is. For instance, if you've got a 30 mile an hour drop in speed, you can click on the dot as it gets larger and it'll show you that. So just a great tool for our traffic management centers to be able to utilize in some of those more rural applications where we don't necessarily have ITS devices deployed there. And then also we utilize various social media accounts. We have a pretty famous weatherman in our largest media market here, who becomes somewhat of a traffic reporter and things of that nature based off of what he tweets and retweets. And he's actually driven a lot of traffic to our State 511 site based off of what he sends out, especially around weather events and some of those kind of things. And then we've got some other various Facebook pages, or even one of our TMCs utilizes a local kind of blog site that does some things and stays on top of what's happening in their local area, and they've actually gotten some crash information off of that before. So pretty interesting in how we've been able to utilize these various aspects of our crowdsourced opportunities. So Amy talked a little bit about, a good bit about Hurricane Michael, so I won't waste your time with any more information on it. Just know that it was a large storm and people heed the warnings to get out of the way. So evacuations, I believe these dates are pretty accurate, or at least times. We started to see the impacts to Alabama roadways heavily on the 9th of October in 18. Specifically, we'll talk about I-10, so a little bit further west from where Amy's people were leaving and coming in our direction. So we had to try to manage that in the best way that we could. So this is just a snippet of one of our performance measure tools. I really want you to see in this application just how significant the queuing was. If you look towards the middle of the screen there around the word Mobile, there is a tunnel that goes under the Mobile River, where Mobile River dumps out into Mobile Bay. That is the I-10 tunnel that continues on over to Mississippi from that point. And that's one of the largest choke points on I-10. So it's really difficult for the trucks to go through that, commercial vehicles to go through that and continue their speed. So it just continues to queue up behind that. All right, so if we look at that route and we go from the Mississippi state line to the Florida state line, this is just to kind of visualize the multiple ways that we can produce information for both internally, which is we update our leadership on what's happening on the roadways during these type of events, and also that we can utilize through our TMCs to put out accurate information as far as travel times or incidents and things of that nature. In this specific case, so the queuing that we saw, this is a delay graph that we created based off of that. That highlights that the average delay at that highest peak time was a little over 40 minutes. So just another visual tool that we have to be able to put that information in front of our leadership. This one's a good one that I think we really gain a lot of information out of. So if you look at this contour graph, I've highlighted, written on here where the tunnel, the location of the tunnel as far as in terms of it's about halfway between. So this is the congestion and delays and queuing that we experience due to the traffic trying to get through the tunnel. And they actually implemented for this event some commercial truck detours. So they would route the commercial traffic off onto the causeway and send it around, put it on 165 up to I-65 and back down to Mobile, because like I said earlier in the presentation, it's really difficult for commercial vehicles in that level of congestion to maintain speed in coming out of the grade of that tunnel. So an effort to try to help facilitate additional flow to get through there, and I feel like that did a very good job. But you can also see the other, like, so the congestion to the further to the south that you see around the exit 44, that is one of the more populated areas for dining choices and fuel stations and things of that nature, where people getting off and coming on as they're leaving to refuel or to stop and have some lunch or something along those lines to get a bite to eat. There's also shopping in that area. Not everybody at this point was trying to evacuate, so you've got the normal citizens of Alabama that are doing their normal day-to-day routines mixed in with this traffic as well. So this is just a really good visual that illustrates the impacts to that. And the next slide that I've got here is just kind of a baseline to illustrate what that is. So this was the Tuesday before that evacuation took place. So you see this kind of yellow line around that 40-mile marker, around exit 25 there, that illustrates what a normal typical day would be in that scenario. So when you lay these two graphics side by side, you can really illustrate the impacts of what we experienced. Like I said, this was a teaching presentation that we gave here at our central office, and one of the things that we often get hit with, we know that we don't get volume data out of our probe data right now. So a lot of times we get asked from our front office staff, what are the volumes? What are the volumes? So we tried to show and illustrate to our local partners how they can go in and look at our continuous count station data and be able to pull this data when you start to look at it as an after-action report as to what kind of volumes did we experience, so they can start putting a level of volumes equitable when you see this kind of congestion in a non-recurring fashion. This is kind of what you're starting to see. So just a tool that we provided to them to help educate their leadership on what's actually going on. One of the other ways that we do this is, unfortunately, this is a live stream, so I don't have any shots of what actually took place on the night during that evacuation, but we utilize these in our traffic management centers. It's a speed dashboard. All of that is done based off of probe data. So you can see dips and speeds at certain locations. Obviously, the one for that day would have been a lot lower than the 60-mile-an-hour kind of threshold that we have. But this is a very good status at a glance tool, especially in incident management applications, to where when they see this this graph dip down, that they know something's going on, we need to investigate, kind of thing. So what do we do based off of what we learned? It gives us an option during operations, during actual live event, to take action. So when we see these kind of congestion levels there, our Regional Traffic Management Center there at the Tunnel Operations Center in Mobile will post congestion warning messages through our Algo Traffic app. We have a drive mode, so if people are actually utilizing that functionality, they can set a parameter of whether 5 miles, 10 miles, 2 miles, whatever, that they will get an alert before they reach that. So in this case, it will give them an audible alert that there's congestion ahead. That kind of thing. But it also gives us an opportunity to allocate an appropriate response from our safety service patrols. We run those in the Mobile area, and based off of this, we may determine that we need to reallocate some from, say, I-65 and bring them over to the I-10 corridor. And lastly, adjust signal timings along the alternate routes if, and I put that in italics, available, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute. So I-10 is the big animal. It's the quickest way to get out of the Pensacola area and head west when a storm that's coming kind of north to east. But more than I-10 was impacted in this scenario. So I-65 carried some impacts, but there's also other feeder routes, U.S. routes, coming out of Florida going north, such as 231, 331, 431, that come through Alabama that were impacted as well. So as we look at another shot of our performance measures site, unfortunately this may be a little bit difficult to view. If it is, I apologize, but I've come in and put some circles. We saw some significant queuing here on I-65 just south of Montgomery, and then over on US 231 in the Troy area, there's a lot of signals right through the heart of Troy, again down in Ozark, and then for those of you familiar with the Dothan area, coming out of Panama City as well, is kind of a circular route around the city, but we've got a pretty good partner there that helps manage those signals well. The depths of these impacts are not as visual through this because I had to zoom out to be able to encompass a large area, but there are certainly impacts that were felt there. Not only that, let's move north of the Montgomery area. This is I-65, a little south of the Birmingham area. You can see kind of the 459, which is the bottom part of the bypass around the Birmingham area. So we felt impacts as far north as Birmingham from the evacuation efforts here. And these were a little bit heavier than what we would normally see on a typical beach season weekend of traffic going to and from the beach. So just a little bit higher, wider view of that. So we've got Montgomery down here in kind of the southern right side, and then up towards Birmingham in the northern middle. So you can see not only did we have those impacts in Birmingham, we've also got some areas, and this is our Chilton County area here, that provide some significant queuing in other areas where people can get off and on and get fuel and food and things of that nature too. This is somewhat pretty common, especially this year. There's been so much pent-up demand based off of all of the stay-at-home orders and things of that nature, people wanting to get back out, get to the beach. So we've seen a good bit of this typical queuing kind of between the city of Montgomery and the city of Birmingham on I-65 during that normal beach traffic this year. So that's been pretty interesting. And for somebody that commutes that route every day to come to work, it gets kind of aggravating on Fridays. So back up to the Birmingham area a little bit. I want to talk specifically kind of around some of those impacts as we got close to this Alabaster area. I've circled this location here on US 31. So as you can see, I-65 is really congested. And what happens, especially in this day and age where we've got all of these different devices that are telling us, hey, there's traffic ahead, you know, reroute, all those kind of things. And a lot of people will just continue to turn right until it gets them around where they're going. We're starting to see, obviously, you can see congestion building on the alternate, the diversion route here of US 31. And I put this here, we've got a T intersection. Do you think that we may have a signal timing issue here as we start to see this traffic back up, and what could we do about that? So this is the same picture. It's just slid down a little bit further. I did not circle the intersection, but as time grew, this is at about 2:05 in the afternoon. We have now basically put congestion all the way through this detour. So here's an opportunity that we can make some signal timing changes and improve that possibly. And then here again is just a volume comparison that we had in that same area, just showing them and illustrating how they can utilize these tools to educate and inform leadership and the public of actually what we're seeing and the impacts. So all that being said, where did we go with this experience? So I mentioned earlier that the base of this presentation was given internally to our folks to educate them about the tools that are available for them to be able to build these information sessions on their own. That was the first meeting that we'd had for years. We've done a kind of hurricane prep type meeting that would be held in the Mobile area, usually in early spring. And the meeting that this presentation was given at was kind of our first traffic-related weather conditions meeting. So we brought folks in from our northern sections that deal with more snow and ice than necessarily hurricane evacuations. And because it's as important, obviously, as we'll hear next from some of our friends in Kentucky and how they've used it in some of those kind of conditions. So really broadened the scope of that meeting, and it's something that we feel like is going to be very influential in how we learn and grow and handle these in the future. A focus on traffic signal connectivity and operations. That's why I wanted to illustrate that, specifically that one location in Birmingham. We've had a pilot program going on signal operations for a couple of years over in our Tuscaloosa area. We saw great benefit from that and have begun to expand that around the state. The Mobile, Baldwin County areas of this are currently going through upgrades now, getting connectivity to most all of those traffic signals and being able to remotely monitor and operate those signals. So we're doing some great things, and the visualization of this has really driven us to say, hey, there's benefit here that we can garner based off of these performance measures. And then lastly, the focus on our municipal partners. So I mentioned the city of Dothan and that ring structure around 231 in that lower right-hand corner of the southern part of the state. We have worked very diligently with them. They have done a lot of things on their own as far as deploying traffic cameras. And like I mentioned, that their diligence in operating their signals. We have actually integrated their cameras into our Algo traffic platform, so those cameras are visible to anybody that visits that site for some real-time status and operation, and we've got some other efforts ongoing specifically around some of those evacuation routes to be able to broaden those eyes and increase our real-time situational awareness for both us and our partners at EMA, and sharing resources with obviously Florida and Mississippi as we expect these type of events obviously to not go away. And that is all that I have. We'll take some questions at the end, so with that I'll throw it back to James. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, thanks Brett, very informative, and thanks for sharing some of your, as you said, internal presentation. I'm sure it was very useful to our external webinar participants today too. And just a great display of the range of crowdsourced data you guys have been using now for a while, the probe data, the Waze data, social media data, and then how you're integrating it to a number of analytics tools as well, the Algo reports and Clear Guide. So great stuff. If you have any questions for Brett, go ahead, put them in the question pod. I see some being generated now, so that's good to see. Let me go ahead and transition now to our next presenters. So we moved west from I-10, Florida, to Alabama, and now we'll head north on, I guess, I-65 that Brett talked about. We'll go through Tennessee and land in Kentucky, where our friends Randy and Chris are waiting by to give us our next presentation. So they're going to talk about crowdsourced data for winter weather. Randi is been with KYTC for 16 years now. She started her career working in the Lexington district in construction, maintenance, operations, permits, and highway safety. And then more recently, for the last few years, she's been managing the statewide road weather program. Along with Randi's Chris Lambert. Chris is a member of our EDC Crowdsourcing for Operations national team. He's been with KYTC for 23 years, currently a systems consultant for the Division of Maintenance, and he's implemented and improved their real-time big data systems, which are pretty impressive. And so he uses a number of dashboards and applies them to all sorts of application areas, from incident response and traveler information systems, and what you'll hear today is about their road weather, winter weather systems as well. So Randi and Chris, take it away.
All right, thanks, James. Like James said earlier, Chris and myself were the dynamic duo for Kentucky with road weather data and operations. So yeah, come on up north, I-65 and I-75, away from those hurricanes, and come on into the land of ice storms and winter flooding. So who we are, Kentucky is a state with the highway department. So we have 12 highway districts, and each district has two, we call it project delivery and preservation branch managers. So we kind of joke around sometimes. We've got 12 different ways of doing things, and then really on up to 24 different ways of doing things with having two of those branch managers per district. 120 counties. Each of those counties has at least one barn. We're getting near 28,000 centerline miles, brings us about 65,000 million miles. I think we rank about 7th with the size of the network that we maintain in the nation. For winter operations, we have around 2,000 state-employed drivers, give or take, around 1,000 state-owned trucks. We do have, we contract out rather quite a bit resting around 400 contract trucks right now. And right now I will mention that with these contract trucks, we do not have a lot of AVL data coming from those, and keep that in mind later when we're talking about some of our data and different things. We got around 500 support personnel, and when I say support personnel, that's basically anybody that helps out with winter operations that's not in a truck. So any of us that are monitoring things, our TOC operators, management, any level of management, those types of folks. So that's who we are, and with our presentation, Chris and I are going to go back and forth a little bit, so I'm going to hand things over to Chris.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, so how do you keep all that organized, right? You've got 12 districts, 120 counties, you've got 15 or so hundred personnel, or 2,000 whatever personnel. Like, there's a lot of people involved in snow and ice. So several years ago, in 2014, we signed our WAYS agreement, and we actually used a little bit of that data, just kind of visualizing that on a map, and started to understand the legitimacy of crowdsourcing data during winter operations. And that was kind of our aha moment with crowdsourcing data. And we really just kind of built on it from there, everything from speed data to the incident reports coming in from people, or our own folks, which I'll get to in a second, AVL data. So we kind of mesh all this together. And I'm going to hit some of the technical parts, but I've highlighted some of the what you consider more of the crowdsourcing and probe data that we receive other than the snowplows there. You know, we've got HERE data that we license, which HERE data I had to figure out for somebody the other day. We have 23,000 of the 26 or 27,000 miles of coverage. So we've got 23,000 miles of coverage there. And then, you know, we also pull in Twitter information, Coco Raws, et cetera. So how do we, you know, why do we do all this? Well, several years ago, we started thinking about data, and it actually came down to, you know, a lot of people were doing things in the connected vehicle space and some other areas, and putting out sensors and things. And we thought, well, we need to concentrate on the data, right? We need to understand the data and how to apply different, you know, methodologies. We're managing the data, understanding it, visualizing it. So we kind of went, started at the back end first and kind of worked our way forward. And so we've got different types of data with polygons and, you know, weather data. We snapped those to, we broke our roadway network into half-mile segments, and so we add any of the large areas of data we have, like a National Weather Service forecast. We're gonna apply that to any of the half-mile segments inside of that polygon, and then line segments. We try to match those up to our linear referencing system as well. So we always have a beginning mile point, ending mile point for any kind of congestion information or anything else that may come in a line form or a work zone or something. And then points. What do we do with, you know, incidents and vehicle data, AVL data, and all that? So we process all that data as well, but we do something a little different. We process it also based on distance and direction, which is a little bit more advanced usage of GIS. We take into account the directionality of the point and the line segments to make sure they're properly snapped to the correct line segment, so that we now understand exactly where our salt is applied. Is that on the ramp or the main line or the bridge? So using the directional information really helps with trying to understand some of the really really specific use cases that we have. And just to very briefly, you can look at this later. This is our architecture. We used to run an on-premise architecture. We had Hadoop and all these great big data things running on-premise, but that took a lot of our time. Took about 50% of our developers' time to maintain all those servers. So we were spending about $400,000 in labor every year just trying to maintain that cluster. It was great. I don't want to take anything away from it. I'm very proud of our on-premise system, but we moved to Google Cloud now, and we're doing really good there. We do process, I've just updated this recently, we're now processing 137 million records of data per day. That's how much we have coming in. And so again, how do you make sense of this though? Great, it's great that you're getting all this data, you're processing it against your linear referencing system, but then how do you actually turn data into information? And that's what this flow chart is for. you'll see the incoming data over on the right side. These are our different data feeds that we have. Goes into our big data system where we're processing that against our roadway network. And then we have some automated outputs, your email alerts. We send summary emails out once per hour about our snow and ice activity across the state. That used to take a couple hours just to accumulate because you would call each district, and each district would have to call each county. And so now what we do, and I'll get to this in a second, we kind of crowdsource our data entry and make all that available in real time, and then we just summarize it every hour and send that out. And then we've got some other, different email alerts that we're starting to do with incident detection or high water over the roadway reports. We've got some really great dashboards. But over on the left side of the screen, on the far left side of the screen, you'll see a little bit different. Those are the people involved, and all those people kind of meet up in Microsoft Teams. And so we've unified all of our communications this last year into Teams, and this includes everybody from the executive management all the way to, the drivers or foremen or whoever else wants to join. So we've got about 526 people in one single Microsoft Teams, and they're all communicating in real time in different channels, and we have one channel per district. But then inside of Teams, they can launch into GoKY and Snow and Ice Dashboard. GoKY is our publicly available, kind of our 511 system. And then the Snow and Ice Dashboard, that's where all of our really heavy data-intensive stuff is located, and that's where a lot of our stats and things are. And then we've got those performance dashboards down there, which Randy will cover later. Communications, again, it was really great this year. One of our districts in Eastern Kentucky, which we rarely ever hear from, they were one of the top contributors in Microsoft Teams. There was just something about it that kind of clicked, and I guess COVID kind of forced us into this situation. But Randy and I had started to experiment with Teams a couple years ago before anybody ever heard of COVID. And so this is great to see this platform take off, and just people statewide are contributing. So we actually kind of use this as a gauge, like a communication gauge for us to say, okay, how much are people really communicating in here, and how much information is getting out to the rest of the state. And it was nice to hear Secretary Gray say that before he goes into a news conference, he would check my Teams to see what the latest is. So we would give him a briefing, but then he would turn around and he would check Teams to make sure that that briefing was still up to date. So that was really cool to know that the Secretary was checking that just moments before going on the news. And then internal crowdsourcing, I mentioned this before. It was really important for us, once this idea kind of caught on of crowdsourcing data, we started to do this with our own staff. It used to be that there was a lot of phone calls that took place, and again, it took about 2 hours for a single person in central office to kind of pull all this information together and compile it and give it to management. And now we're able to do this in real time. So now the county and the district offices, anyone with a KYTC ID or email address can open up this page and start inputting information. We do capture the person and the time, and then that information is updated on our publicly available map, the GoKY map, in addition to our Snow and Ice dashboard. So we really started to kind of crowdsource our own people, and I think that's really important too, is don't forget about your own folks when it comes to crowdsourcing. You don't have to always think about crowdsourcing coming in from some kind of a third-party vendor. And I'm going to turn this back over to Randy. And Randy, take it away.
All right, thanks, Chris. So now I'm going to go over some of our operational use of all this data that we're getting, all this crowdsourcing stuff that it's coming in. So I'm going to touch upon flooding a little bit. I know we more talking about winter operations here with our presentation, but anymore, flooding is getting to be a big part of a Kentucky winter. So here's just a few pictures, check those out, of some pretty severe flooding that we had in early March of just this past year. Here is a snapshot of how many high water road closures that we had, or that we've had so far this year, 914 records counted. You can see some of those are rock slides or damage, probably looks like about 12% overall, and the rest is just closures due to flooding. But this is a year-to-date count, 914. Could be a little higher now that we've had some storms come through the past couple of days. So, but 577 of those were from the March flooding. And these records are counts from our TOC operators. So I want to talk about that briefly with the high water closures and again, kind of crowdsourcing our own folks. Here is a screenshot of some reports of flooding from 2018. So what we did during this flooding event was we took to social media and just asked people to, out there, Waze users, please mark flooding on the app when you come across it. So you can see here with the state, we had a pretty broad usage of the app with areas. You can see in the urban areas, Louisville, Lexington, Northern Kentucky, heavier use, but even across the more rural areas of far western and eastern Kentucky, a lot of reports. So this is an area that we are really interested with expanding crowdsourcing from a third party app from Waze to just try to get a better handle, better capturing of that data to be able to interpret just how flooding does affect our network. So most of what I'm going to talk about is from our February 2021 winter storm and then our use of the data during winter. So this past February, we did experience a severe couple weeks of winter weather. You can see there kind of summary of dates and what we had as far as precipitation, depending on where you were in the state. Now, the further east and south you went, the more of this was freezing rain and ice. So really, really severe towards the far eastern part of the state. This event did put us into that federal disaster declaration area, pushed us over that threshold for money spent. So 44 counties declared a disaster. We think so far total is about $70 million with FEMA eligible expenses. $20 million of that is for state public assistance, majority of that for state network affected with the category B and A FEMA expenditures. So this map here, this is a screenshot of our Waze setup, or not Waze, excuse me, our 511 setup. As Chris mentioned earlier, he talked about how the county status of our users changed that. So it is a little unusual for Kentucky to experience such an event that has an entire statewide impact. Most of the time our winter weather hits, maybe just the western part or the northern or eastern area, but it is unusual for the whole state to be impacted. And so in this screenshot, the county status, that's more of the forward layer that you're seeing. But if you can, I know it's small and maybe a little difficult to see, but if you look in the background, you can see our routes. We have a lot of them are kind of in that yellow or red colored area, signifying that we had some delays with mobility. So this storm, to give you an idea of Kentucky winter weather, if you look at the individual events, none of those are really unusual by themselves, but when you have them back to back to back like this, and the fact too that in between all these dates, the cold weather settled in. I think it's one of those polar vortex type setups where the cold weather just kind of sets in. That's a little unusual too for us to stay below freezing for that amount of time. So it's pretty impactful with our network. And I will ask you all to remember the statewide impact and how much of our network was impacted here, because we'll talk about that here a little bit later with lessons learned. Again, just some pictures. Those of you that may not be familiar with ice storms and the impact and what that looks like. So a lot of widespread impact, a lot of trees down, a lot of takes a lot of time to recover. So our decision support page, this is an internal view. The link to this is not password protected because we have other agencies that look at this, but this, we have more information coming into this view than what we would show publicly on our 511 type of our public facing setup. So we have all of our HERE data coming in. We have Waze data. You can see the little the vehicles for vehicle on the shoulder and different views. So our users, so with this tool, we set it up to have just kind of a one-stop shop for as much information as possible. And with training, the way I've explained to our users is that this is, when you look at this, this provides clues to us as to what's going on out there without having cameras everywhere and people everywhere. This, you know, it's a one-stop shop to give us clues as to what's going on. And with that data, so we bring it in with different graphic setups too to be able to look at it real time and as after action view. And for the sake of time, I'm going to very briefly go over these different views. And I know it's kind of tiny, but I'll explain real quick what these little things that you're looking at is. So the bar graphs on the top, that shows activity with our trucks, hours, material usage. And you see the little blue and the little red dots, those are Twitter activity. So we capture all the hashtag KYWX tweets. Alabama mentioned that they have a meteorologist that's kind of famous in their state, very active on social media. We have one of those too, so we do have a lot of social media presence in our state with using that hashtag KYWX with weather. And it's pretty interesting to see those dots increase as our activity increases and decrease. So it's pretty interesting to see that pattern here in that view. This is, again, kind of an all-in-one view where you can see that same bar chart along the top and then graphs for each district underneath. Again, you can see our truck activity increases as our severity index. Real quick, we have the storm severity index here in Kentucky, which kind of summarizes winter weather that we experience. It brings in temperature, weather type, radar presence, wind, and scores those numerically. Here's a district view, just kind of a close-up view of, you can see trucks out, application rate, the approximate cost that we've spent. Again, this can be viewed both real-time and also as a after-action review. This is one of my favorite views, corridor view. This particular shot is of I-75, and there's a lot of information here, so I'll go over it very briefly. On the right, you can see a summary of weather that's experienced within the time slot that you're viewing, and the graph beneath the map of the state shows speeds. The green line is speeds of the interstate there. The orange bars is our truck AVL activity. The red is the severity. So this next shot that I'll show will zoom in on that graph. You can see here with the top red line and that red shaded area is our severity index. So it bumps up a little bit there in the middle, and our speeds take a nosedive there. And as our speeds drop, our truck activity increases. So that's nice to go back to view and see that, you know, this data makes sense, right? That as speeds drop, severity goes up, our truck activity increases. So that's good to see with what, you know, our activities in the winter. I know we're cutting it close with time, so again, this is some breakout views of our severity index. We are we don't yet have performance measures set up here in Kentucky with winter operations, but we are definitely going down that road. So we're breaking out different views of our severity indices in different parts of the state. So that's about it for this slide, again, for the sake of time, because I really want to spend more time on the lessons learned. So this past season, we did have a couple of hiccups with our technology coming in. At one point, again, if you think about how I mentioned this was the February ice storm was a major statewide event. So we exceeded our calls, our API calls, with both our AVL vendor and with not necessarily with the crowdsourcing itself, but where we host that and ArcGIS online. We broke it. So the trucks was really obvious because when looking back at that, I mean, clearly I knew that we had more than 12 trucks active across the state. So that was more obvious that there was an issue going on there. But with the HERE data and the crowdsourcing data, that wasn't as obvious because looking at the map, everything looked green, everything looked great. So we, as a cabinet, our management, we got a little embarrassed. We took, I guess, a little bit of a black eye with the fact that that failed, but it wasn't an obvious failure. Like I said, everything looked great. And our director was on calls with the governor's office talking about, state office closures, closing vaccination sites, that kind of thing, major decisions. Fortunately, there wasn't really a big fallout from this. Like, we still, closed state offices on days when we needed to, reschedule those vaccination sites. So there wasn't a direct impact, but it was embarrassing as a cabinet. Again, I have there too good to be true. So when you're looking back, during an ice storm, it's such a major event. When everything looks excellent, when everything's green, I mean, there is such a thing as too good to be true, right? So to solve that, we had some pretty strong conversations with our vendors. How are we going to fix this? How fast can we fix this? What's going to happen in the future? How are we going to fix this right now? And they did respond to us, and during this event was actually able to fix those for us. The input constraints. So I will say that never ever use open-ended fields for user input. So you saw Chris mention before the drop-down boxes for storms, storm type, accumulation type. Those are dropped down for a reason because we don't want users to have open-ended. So when you're looking at this data, when people spell things a little differently, or they capitalize something, or they don't capitalize something, that can cause you issues down the road with some of these things when you're looking at the data. So in the future there, I will say that, prior to a major event, ice storm, flooding, what have you, we have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people, with National Weather Service, with emergency management, our own management here with the cabinet. In the future, I'm going to include our vendors with ESRI and our AVL system with how can we avoid, problems with some of this technology in the future. So at this point, I'll ask Chris if he has anything to add here. Again, I know we're kind of crunched for time. Chris, you got anything to add?
No, we'll go ahead. And keep going here. Thanks, Randy. That was really good.
Great, thanks.
Really good summary of the scene.
Right. I didn't mention the picture, but I will say something about that real quick. So always turn around, don't drown. This was a picture from this last March. You can see, looking at that car, it's a probably 30-year-old Toyota Camry, and poor car made it this long in life, and they didn't turn around, so that was the end of that car.
The earth ate it.
Yep, it ended its day. So, Again, I'll toss things back to James.
All right. Thanks, Chris and Randy. Good stuff. Very informative. You know, you don't have hurricanes, but you definitely get your fair share of winter weather and adverse weather. So I think I might just stay where I'm at here in Washington State, although we've got our own problems. Just want to thank our presenters again for great presentations. Their presentations will be available for download and download pod or on the website where you registered. And I know we're pretty much out of time here, so I'm just, I want to respect everyone's time. There were some questions. We will copy these questions and we'll respond offline to each of the people that asked the questions. So we will follow up and make sure we answer those. So sorry we didn't have more time to do a live Q&A discussion here. Let's go ahead and transition to our closing here. There's a number of resources. They're basically all captured on our website. So if you download this presentation, that is a clickable link, that website there, where we have all of our webinar series recordings, technical assistance, fact sheets, FAQs. You can subscribe to our e-news that gets sent out about once a month or so as well. So it's all available on our website. And I just want to thank you all. Feel free to contact myself or my co-leads, Greg Jones and Ralph Volpe, from Federal Highway Administration as well. We have a number of resources, like I said, on our website, but we also provide workshops and training opportunities as well if you're interested in your state or local agency. Thank you again, Kevin, and the NOCO staff for hosting us. And as we close here, Kevin's going to bring up a couple of poll questions, and if you don't mind answering those before you leave, it should just take a minute. That would be very helpful for us as we plan future webinars on this topic of crowdsourcing for operations. So again, thank you all. I'll hand it over to Kevin to close us out. Maybe unmute, Kevin, if you're speaking.
Thank you, James. Sorry about that. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, and I want to thank the panelists and the moderator for their time, and we had some really good information presented here today. Like I mentioned at the beginning, a recorded version of this webinar, along with the presentation slides, will be available on the NOCO website. On behalf of the National Operations Center of Excellence and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, especially the extra time now, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.